Hello, welcome, it's Richard here. Welcome to all you Kate Bush fans and other viewers as well. This video is a review of 2011's 50 Words for Snow by Kate Bush. Hope you can see that. I thought this was the appropriate time of year to record this video. We're just into winter, it's the 3rd of December. And I don't know about you, but I get to this time of year and I think, oh goody, it's time to play 50 Words for Snow, because it just doesn't feel appropriate to play it at any other time of year other than winter. So it's my go-to winter album. Now, before we start, just to make sure we're clear on this is not the kind of review where I play the music. This is just my opinions on the album, track by track. And also, for those of you who've never heard 50 Words for Snow, it's not a Christmas album. I mean, this is not akin to Annie Lennox's Christmas Cornucopia. Kate didn't intend it to be a Christmas album. It's an album that has songs that revolve around themes of snow and winter and snowy landscapes and things that are associated with snow, hence the title 50 Words for Snow, which is the title track, but we'll come on to that later. I just wanted to talk about the time when this album came out, 2011. In fact, this version is the 2018 remaster, which did fix a couple of issues around, I don't know, there were some really sort of bassy parts and a couple of frequency cracks as well that occurred, I noticed on the original. This solves those issues, which I'm pleased to say. Okay, 2011. It wasn't a great winter for me, personally. One of our cats, Biscuit, our little boy, was very poorly during that winter and subsequently passed away. So for the couple of years after 2011, I wasn't able to play this at all, because every time I did play it, it reminded me of that time and reminded me of his death. And it was just a really sad time, you know, which we all go through. We have to, you know, go through those emotions of life, those, what's the word for it, those life events. That's the word I was looking for. But now I've got through that and I can play this album and thoroughly enjoy it. Let's get on with it before I waffle on too long. The first track on the album is Snowflake, and this is sung by Kate's son Bertie. And I view it as a sort of mother and son duet in a way. It talks of the birth of a snowflake from the sky falling down to the ground. It starts with the line, "I was born in a cloud," and Bertie's vocals are choir boy-like, very high but semi-spoken in places, beautifully performed actually. And his voice was still quite childlike at this stage compared to his voice in Before the Dawn, in the live show, which he appeared as the painter in Ariel. And Kate takes a back seat. She repeats the same line throughout the song. And in a way, I really get a sense of swirling snow in this repetitive song. It's a hypnotic song. The piano riffs repeat themselves and there are sort of falling notes, cascading notes, and also at times the piano sounds quite muffled as well. But yes, it's the story of a snowflake, and it's almost like Kate is the mother and the snowflake is the son. And Bertie describes at one point, I am ice and dust. You know, we all know or should know that snowflakes are born from a sort of grain. I think they have to have a little bit of dust to wrap themselves around when they form. And of course, all snowflakes are unique as well. You know, there are no two snowflakes the same. And Kate's line as this sort of mother figure is, the world is so loud, keep falling, I'll find you. I think that's got a bit of a layered meaning to it, you know. You've got this, I'll find you. So no matter that there are millions of snowflakes falling, I'll know which one you are because you're my son. That's how I took it. You know, that's the meaning that I got from it. But also the world is so loud. The modern world that we live in is so loud. And the only time that it really looks pristine and clean and is muffled is when there's been a heavy snowfall. We can all experience that. Just go out into the street after a heavy snowfall and it's quiet because I guess there aren't as many people out driving in the snow. The action of snowfall, especially thick snowfall, insulates and it changes the way that we receive sound. So it's really interesting. So the world is so loud, keep falling and I'll find you. That line is repeated throughout. And I really would love to listen to this song watching snow fall. I've never actually done that. And when you're watching it in the street light, you can see the swirling eddies of the air pushing the snow around. And you get these sort of repeated patterns. And if you've ever tried to follow a snowflake falling, it's quite hard to do that, but you can. You suddenly get drawn into the motion of the snow. And all of these thoughts and feelings go through my head when I listen to this song. And Bertie describes several different scenes. One involving horses, where you get this wonderful roll of drums as these horses are wading through the snowdrifts. It's a beautiful song. It's quite long, but all of the tracks on here are quite long. And Kate's exploring this long form version with a lot more air in the tracks. She's using negative space in music to good effect. Hypnotic, very hypnotic and very enjoyable. And I also feel that the first 3 tracks work well together on this album. And in saying that, I would recommend anybody new to this album to make sure you're not disturbed and listen to it all the way through, because once you get into Snowflake, you're kind of hooked in there and you want to know more. Lovely. It's generally got an icy, crystal clear sort of feeling, apart from the muffled piano sounds. Bertie's voice on this first track is almost like a piece of ice crystal in places. And yeah, hypnotic, mesmerizing, all of those kind of words that you can use to describe this first track. Then we go into track 2, which is Lake Tahoe. I love this track. It's quite dark and it's quite sad as well. Anybody who's got elderly pets will relate to this track. Let's sort of talk a little bit about it. I don't want to give away too much in talking about any of these songs because, as I've said before in other reviews, Kate's songs are stories and they unfold, and that's particularly relevant for this album. There is a real unfolding with a couple of surprises and little twists. So Lake Tahoe, it kind of starts with a warning about how cold Lake Tahoe is. And I have read stories about Lake Tahoe and how there is a sort of legend or a myth around the fact that criminals have dropped their murdered corpses into Lake Tahoe and they sink to the bottom, to the icy depths, and stay preserved, and occasionally float to the surface and reveal themselves as these perfectly preserved bodies. That features in this song. So there's this warning: don't ever swim there. Just stand on the edge and look in there. And then Kate takes over, because that line is sung by a guest artist or guest artistes. I think there's a couple of singers on this. And she takes over, and you might see a woman. I'm not going to say much more, but basically the ghost of this woman goes looking for her pet, her elderly pet, and she talks about this pet's adventures through the spooky wood and the sticky fields, where the dog is looking for his owner, and they are reunited, albeit in the spirit world. And it's such an interesting story, and who would ever think to write about that, about the ghost of a woman in Lake Tahoe in Victorian dress who has floated to the surface and her spirit has risen to look for her spirit dog. It is spooky. It does have a spooky edge to it, not in a sort of screechy ghost in Wuthering Heights type of way, but quite a sedate and gentle way. So you have to listen to appreciate it. That is followed by track 3, which is Misty, which arguably is probably my favourite track on the album, and probably the weirdest track on the album, because this tells of the story of a woman who has an affair, a one-night stand with a snowman. Yes, it does sound a slightly twisted version of Raymond Briggs's The Snowman. Yeah and no, not really. I don't think so. It's a bit of a twisted dream, not a nightmare, but it has an element of mystery to it. It starts off with the woman who is making this snowman roll his body, give him eyes, make him smile for me. And then in the story, this person has cut their hand and goes back inside the house. And then we switch to this person going to bed, turning off the light, switching on a starry night, and the windows blowing open and the bedroom filling with falling snow. Now, there's several things going on here. I always thought of the line, "My hand is bleeding, I run back inside." It's almost like there's been some kind of bloodletting that has enabled some spooky spell to occur in the snow that has made the snowman and somehow brought him to life. I don't know whether that's the intention. Kate's lyrics are very often ambiguous, and it's left to us as the listener to work out what is going on. And in my mind, that was what was happening. Then the next spooky thing is this concept of her switching on a starry night. Well, if it's snowing outside, it's not going to be a starry night because it's going to be filled with snow clouds. So we've got this kind of weird dream happening, and then this other sort of dream happening too. And then we get this slightly comedic in places and slightly, what's the word? Slightly weird. So she talks of his creamy skin and his snowy white arms, and there's almost this jazzy flavour to it. But then we get this weird segment where she talks of his mouth being full of dead leaves and twisted branches and stolen grasses from the slumbering lawn where she's rolled the snow. I don't know whether you have ever made a snowman before. I have made a few when I was a child, but you do have to create a ball and roll it around the snowy lawn. As it gathers more snow, it gets bigger and bigger, and of course it picks up the detritus from the sleeping grass, and there will be bits of grass and leaves and twisted branches. And when she sings these lines about those elements in the snow, it's almost as though she's slightly weirded out, slightly freaked out, full of twisted branches and deadly. It's like she's slightly ugh, but she's going with it anyway because he's a snowman. I'm not going to reveal what happens at the end. I guess, without saying, it's a tragic end. It's a snowman. But it's a bit of a, what's the word? It's a bit of an epic. And again, she puts the piano to great effect. There are several riffs throughout that are completely hooky, that stay in your mind for so long. And just the opening few notes, you know it's Misty, and you know what's coming, and you've got this journey to go on, albeit a weird journey. Just lovely. I love it. I think it's my favourite track. So, the fourth track, Wildman. This is a change on the album. The mood changes because the first three tracks all have a similar feeling. Piano, orchestral bits, swooping stories that are little epics in themselves. And then Wildman turns into this sort of punchy, beaty number with a breathy spoken vocal, slightly Laurie Anderson in a way. I don't like to compare Laurie Anderson and Kate because they're two different entities completely. I love Laurie Anderson, by the way. But it's the story of people searching for the Yeti, and also a group of people who are trying to protect the Yeti. So we hear that these people are in a location in the Himalayas, I guess it is, and they hear and see things and see footprints in the snow. And it's those sort of familiar stories that we hear about the abominable snowman, the Yeti. Nobody ever seems to have photographed one, but we've seen footprints. So there's this elusive creature, and it's quite a sad song in a way, because there's the line, they want to know you, they will hunt you down, then they will kill you. And we also get a strong sense from the lyrics that this person singing the song is trying to protect the Yeti by covering up the footprints in the snow, which I really love because, hey, so what if there's a Yeti? So what? It's a a creature that supposedly lives in these parts of the world, why should we desperately need to know what this creature is? You know, why? Man's curiosity will drive that creature out and probably make it extinct if we ever discover what it is. You know, I've read stories that they've said, oh, you know, it just simply doesn't exist. It's definitely a bear. The hair was, you know, the DNA of a bear or whatever. We will never know, will we? Hopefully. Let's leave it alone. So yeah, that's Wildman. Great track, lovely single. I was disappointed in the video offerings that Kate gave us. She gave us a selection of what she called video clips, so they were shortened. They were just part of the song with some images. And, you know, I'm grateful to see anything that Kate does visually, but I didn't really understand why it was so short. She also did a video clip for Misty and Lake Tahoe as well. And again, they were shortened videos. Yeah, didn't quite fully understand that. I know making a video is a huge expense and a huge, you know, time waster, if you like. Maybe she just couldn't be bothered doing all of that. I don't blame her in some ways, you know. She's no spring chicken anymore, and these things, you know, they're not easy things to do. They're challenging, but I know how much she loves doing visuals, so anyway, let's move on. The next track is Snowed In at Wheeler Street, guest starring Elton John. When I found out that Elton was on this album, I was not surprised because Kate, I believe, has been a lifelong fan. I'm not really a fan of Elton John at all, but I really love this track, and I really like the way that Kate has directed his vocals, because he sings sort of slightly lower than usual, and it's the story of two lovers who can't stop meeting and losing each other over the eons of time. So they're meeting at certain times in history when there have been significant events like the fall of Rome, 9/11, times like that. It's a very beautiful recording, and again, it's got a different feel to the first three tracks. It is a little bit beatier, and it is sort of atmospheric. The title Snowed In at Wheeler Street does conjure up this coziness around these people having this relationship and being fearful of losing each other again, you know, and that's one of the lines, not again, you know. And at one point Kate says, you know, I'll get some rope and I'll tie us together, you know, so we don't lose each other again. So it has a sadness to it, but the performances are excellent, and Elton's voice and Kate's voice really suit each other. So it's a good track, different than the others. It breaks the mood again, but you do need that sort of uplift after the beginning of this album, which does have quite a bit of sadness running through the whole thing. But I guess this time of year is a dark time, and I guess that's why this isn't a happy jolly Christmas album, because I don't think Kate would ever do that anyway. But yes, Snowed In at Wheeler Street, lovely track. So, onto the title track, 50 Words for Snow. This is a really interesting track. I think when I listened to this properly, probably about the third or fourth time I heard it, I actually had this sort of vision. Kate's music does have a tendency to really invoke some visuals in your brain, as good music should, you know. I mean, I tend to have these videos that play out in my head because I normally close my eyes to listen to good music, so I can fully dive into the track and imagine all these things going on. And the essence of the track is you've got the male in the song, the male character who's a professor, and you've got this female role who is basically saying the numbers from 1 to 50. In this, it's Kate, obviously, in this highly affected voice, which is slightly malevolent, and she is urging the professor to come up with these different words for snow. And as we progress through the track, the words become more and more outlandish and quite fun. And of course, the professor is played by Stephen Fry, whose voice is great at making anything sound true. And, you know, he's got this authoritative voice which, you know, you just believe straight away. But the vision that I had when I listened to this track, I think I might have had a glass of wine or two, but the vision I had was that Kate was playing this ice queen, snow queen kind of character on this big icy throne in this ice wonderland cave, and she sort of captured this professor and she's challenging him to come up with all of these words. And it's the way in which she says the numbers, which are almost seductive but slightly evil as well. And I had this whole vision, and I will never get that vision out of my head whenever I play this. I'm not going to say the words for snow that Stephen says, but it sort of, again, it's like a blizzard, this song, because it's got this constant beat, but it's got these shifting sounds which again echo the shifting snowflakes in a blizzard. And you can almost imagine this magical cave with snow whirling around the professor's character, with Kate willing him on, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. Yeah, really, really interesting track. Love it. It's quite long, and you do kind of think, gosh, we've got to get to 50. But you do get to 50, and it becomes more and more interesting as time goes on. So that's lovely. So the final track on the album is Among Angels, which was the encore at the live show Before the Dawn. A beautiful track, a lovely way to finish the album. And what I love about it is it's got a little false start at the beginning, which is quite sweet. So we get this sense of Kate recording it live, you know, rather than doing this sort of big production. You imagine she's just sat at the piano, singing it, playing the piano, just doing it. And it revolves around the concept that we have angels around us, that we can ask for help whenever we need it. And I know a lot of people believe in that. I'm not going to go into my personal beliefs at this moment. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. And it is sort of tinged with a bit of sadness as well, because you imagine that the person that she's singing it to has gone through some kind of trauma and they're just trying to cope. One of the lines in it is, I might know what you mean when you say you fall apart. Aren't we all the same? In and out of doubt? So, you know, that suggests to me that, you know, we all go through times in our lives where things are difficult, and maybe we do pray even if we're not believers, you know. I know I've gone through dark times where I've kind of, you know, asked the universe for some kind of help if it's available, just in case, you know. It's when we're desperate, isn't it? It's when we're really, really rock bottom and everything else has failed and it's our last ditch attempt to try and get some kind of cosmic assistance, if you like. So it kind of plays into that concept, and it almost ends abruptly. It just sort of finishes, and we're left thinking about those words because it's quite a simple song, and it's probably one of the shortest tracks on the album. I'm not exactly sure how long it is, doesn't say on here, but it is a beautiful ending. And of course the angels connection is the snow angel that, you know, kids make on the lawn, but it also has a connection to summer as well, which is interesting. It talks about the angels shimmering. They shimmer like mirrors in summer, which is complete contrast to the snowy feel that we've had throughout the rest of the album. So I quite like that. And if I reflect on the album in general, just to round off, the whole thing has a mesmerising feel to it. It sparkles, it shimmers, it has an icy coldness to it. You know, if we go back to Lake Tahoe and Misty and Snowflake at the beginning, you can imagine feeling colder as you're listening to them, especially Misty, especially when she talks about the snowman dissolving, icy cold water in Lake Tahoe. You do kind of almost shiver at times. So, you know, the whole thing is tinged with winter, with snow, with ice, frostiness, all of those things that we associate with a cold wintry season and the weather that goes with it. So yeah, that's it. 50 Words for Snow, the album. I love it. A lot of people didn't get it when I read reviews. I read a few fan reviews that people were really struggling to get into it. I struggled, but only because of my personal circumstances at the time. It's a firm favourite now, and I can't wait to give it a spin this winter. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope it's not been too long. I've tried to keep it as brief as possible and not be too rambling with my explanations and personal insights. So thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you very soon, hopefully for another review. We've got a few more albums to go. Thanks so much. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.